he was one of the presenters last month along with Joe Francis. So he'll be popping in and out here throughout the webinar, answering all the technical questions that I'm unable to. But we also do want to start off the presentation day by letting you know, if you did not already receive the notice, that the profiles that Joe and Jan highlighted last month are all live on the web. So I'll be taking you to that site briefly today. Another thing that I thought would be worth spending at least a few minutes on is when we're at the PAD website, it's an amazing resource for us all, particularly for data on New York State. So I just want to point you to a number of things on that site. When you have more time, you should go back and really just explore. We're going to discuss briefly some basic things that we should consider when we're looking for data. I'll provide a brief overview of the American Community Survey that we're increasingly reliant upon now for our socio-demographic data. We'll talk a bit about how we assess the accuracy of the data, because accuracy is a big issue these days. And then we will spend hopefully the last 15 or 20 minutes of the hour learning how to run your own custom profiles using another software package that is free, that is a really nice complement to the profiles that PAD has provided. In the PowerPoint presentation that you have, these are all live links. I would ask you not to go to the websites on your own right now during the presentation. I will actually take you there and show you, because I find that oftentimes people get lost in the website and then have a hard time coming back. So this is the PAD website. We go to share. Is that right, Kim? I want to show them the PAD website, so I go to share.
Yep. And application.
And then
right down it.
Right. Okay. So here's the PAD website. Again, the Program on Applied Demographics. I guess I should not assume that all of you today were able to attend the webinar last month. Just a brief description. Last month, Joe Francis and Jan Vink gave a summary of their profile project that they have now completed for CC. They have provided, I'm going to close my, sorry, have created profiles for each county in the state. If we go along the left-hand side of the PAD website, you'll see there's New York State County Profiles. You click on that, and you will see a map of the state. All you have to do is click on a particular county. Let's just choose Tompkins. And there you are, is their county profile for Tompkins County. And on the left-hand side is their table of contents. Now, all 62 counties are. Another thing that's on this site is, if you can see my cursor. Kim, can they see my cursor as I'm? Okay. My cursor's up in the left-hand corner. There's also a link for the webinar. So if you loved it so much the first time you want to hear it again, or if you were unable to attend last month, it would be worth your time checking out the webinar again. You may also want to forward this link to some colleagues who would be interested. I'd like to spend just a couple minutes on the PAD website in general, just to let you know what types of data they have here. And again, I'm not going to be showing you everything. I just want to show you some of the links. Under the data column on the left, have for New York State counties, and these are separate from the profiles that have been created. One of the beautiful things about the profiles that they created is that it's sort of a comprehensive report for the entire county that brings in not just census data, but agricultural census data, I think economic census data, and some climate variables, etc., in a nice comprehensive package. These other buttons on the PAD site will take you to other data resources that aren't in just a report format, but projections, trends, and maps for New York counties. This school district link, I was just saying to Jan before the webinar started that we may think about in the future doing a separate webinar on school district data. And this would not be just for school district officials. Anyone working at the local and regional level work with school district officials. It's a government unit. They have their budgets. Their budgets influence us in community and economic development. So what's going on in the school districts and what's going on in the communities at large reinforces and influences each other. So seeing some data for school districts around the state would be very helpful for those involved in community development. So there's projections, enrollment projections and trends, budget playgrounds, and more, much more. More data on Census 2010. They have a whole map section that I encourage you to check out and reference maps. And then down in the publication section, that's where I just showed you where the county profiles are. We have the New York Minutes, which is actually a joint collaboration between PAD and CARDI, and every other month Jan and I produce sort of a data snapshot on a different community development issue or demographic issue around the state. So I encourage you to check out the PAD website when you have more time. Is there anything you want to add to that, Jan, right now? Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'd like to add that's a very clever name.
PAD?
No, the New York Minute.
Oh, the New York Minute. I cannot take credit for that. I think
was that you?
I think that was David Brown. David Brown, right. Yeah, the idea was that it was a quick the New York Minute, and that's what we intend. It's just a one-pager on a particular issue, and it has this graphic, a data graphic. So they're also, the publications are also available on the CARDI website. Okay, so back to the presentation. Kim, how do I get back to my PowerPoint? Go up here and stop sharing? Okay.
But you're going to continue sharing, really.
Okay. All right. Oops. Okay, so even though Jan and Joe have provided you with these wonderful profiles and we're going to be leading you to other data resources today, it's very important that we keep in mind the following items when we're doing community profiles, if we're engaged in long short-term planning, anytime we're trying to understand what's going on in our communities or regions, and we're looking for data to try to help us understand those things. No single indicator is representative of your entire community or your county. So one piece of data is not going to tell you everything you need to know. One in time is not going to necessarily represent the community over time, too. So we need to look at multiple points in time to get a handle on trends. And local data is most useful and informative, again, when you're examining it over time. When you're compared to other places, so if you're sitting in Tompkins County, even if you have trend data, you want to contextualize that data. So looking at perhaps surrounding counties, comparing yourself to the state trends as a whole. So you're always asking the question, okay, I'm getting a handle on what's going on in my community, but does that fit the regional pattern or not? And you want to use multiple measures and not just one indicator. So for example, if you're concerned about poverty in your community, you may not just want to look at percent of persons under the poverty line. Even if you have trend data for that, and even if you're able to compare that to other places, you may want to look at different measures of poverty, such as percent of families or households in poverty, percent of children in poverty, percent of elderly people in poverty. Look at thresholds of 125% of the poverty level, so that you're digging down a little bit deeper into the concept that you're exploring. And most of us know this from our own experience, that any time that you're communicating any of this information to an audience, that using graphs, charts, and maps are usually going to be better than a table of numbers. Ask yourself when you're looking at data, does it make sense? And data and numbers do not tell the story without interpretation or context, so that you know again from your own experience, if just looking at a table of numbers, you really have to take time to look at the trends, compare yourself to other places, and start developing more of a story or context behind those numbers. The same is true if you're going to be communicating this to any other audiences. And understanding the American Community Survey is important in order to understand the data itself. So this is what we're going to spend a bit of time on today, is that while the profiles that Pat has produced and the other software package that I'll take you to that will provide you with data is very, very useful, it's very worthwhile understanding a little bit about where the data comes from so that you understand what the limitations are about the data and therefore what you can't say or shouldn't say about the data as a whole. We're going to focus on census geography and census data. Many of you, but perhaps not most of you, know that census data is available not just for the state or the county or the town or village or city that you live in, but it's tabulated at a number of geographic levels. So census tracts, vote districts, congressional districts, school districts. So oftentimes, if you have a question at the local level that's not about your town as a whole or your county as a whole, there may be census data that's already tabulated for that particular geographic area. But we will talk a little bit about as a smaller, if you think about this as a jigsaw puzzle, and that each of these geographic units are a piece of the jigsaw puzzle. The smaller that piece of the jigsaw puzzle goes, though, you are going to run into issues of accuracy. I'll talk a little bit about that. Now, census data in the past was collected in two ways. Every 10 years, the December census, you either received a short form, which was 100% count, that had 7 questions on it, or approximately 1 in 6 households received the long form, which had 53 questions. I was never lucky enough to get one of the long forms. I'm sure anyone that did get the long form that's not a data geek like me was not pleased with it, but those of us that rely on a lot of richness of detail on the data, that was the long form from which the data came from. A very, very expensive endeavor, but a huge, huge sample. The problem with this system was that we had to wait every 10 years to get data. So if you're sitting in 2009 and wanting to do analysis or a plan for your community, you're relying on data that's already just 10 years old. The Census Bureau has come up with a new system. Most of you have probably at least heard of the American Community Survey. It's a replacement for the long form. And so what is happening is they're collecting on a monthly basis samples from all across the country, beginning in 2005. Depending on the size of your community, or that if you think of that jigsaw puzzle again, depending on the population size of that geographic unit, that will determine how frequently you will receive new data. Those areas that have a population of 65,000 and more will get annual estimates. Are they seeing my email? Can I just close my email? If I close my email?
Is it popping? Yeah, you can close your email.
Okay. Those areas that have a population of 20,000 up to 64,999 will get estimates that are based on 3-year pooled of estimates. And those areas below 20,000 will be receiving 5-year estimates. Now, all these areas will get brand new estimates every year. However, they won't be independent. And I'll tell you about that. So if we look at a map for New York State, you're sitting in a county thinking, okay, well, what does that mean for me? So at the county level anyway, if you're in a county that's colored red, you'll be receiving 1-year estimates every year. If you're in an orange county, you'll be receiving a 3-year pooled estimate every year. In the yellow counties, Schuyler and Hamilton, you'll be using 5-year estimates every year. Now, the American Community Survey, what we gained in frequent data releases and the availability of data, we've sort of given up, on the other hand, in some of the accuracy or statistical reliability. And we're going to talk a little bit about margins of error, and this is important to pay attention to because if you're reliant on this data for making any sort of important decisions, you want to know that you can feel fairly confident about the numbers you're using. Now, margin of error, an MOE, it's a way to express how good that estimate is, and it describes the uncertainty because of the sampling that is done that surrounds that estimate. And it's a reminder of the limitations of the estimate. And again, the American Community Survey is based on a sample of the population, a much smaller sample than was used in the decennial census, even with the long form. And as sample size decreases relative to the total population, the variation in the estimate, the margin of error increases. The multi-year estimates, so the 3 or the 5-year estimates, will have a smaller margin of error than the singular estimate, simply because, in general, they're collecting more data points or more cases. And I think this is the first time I've actually used the word UGG on a slide. I'm sure some of you have already said UGG as I've been talking in the last couple slides. And this all sounds too technical for me. I've never used margins there before, so why should I pay attention now? And I put this in because I think between Jan and I, and perhaps others of you out there, presented this material, and even I was speaking with a class of graduate students on Monday, and I could tell there were a few people that were really excited about margins of error, and then there were certain others that thought, oh, how do I avoid even having to pay attention to this? We're not going to be looking at equations. You don't have to be an algebra whiz to understand this. It's just the concept that we really need to get across. You do need to pay attention to margins of error now because we are relying on the American Community Survey that have higher margins of error, higher levels of uncertainty than the data that we're used to using in the past have had. So we really need to know how to use margins of error so that we avoid making a mistake when you're interpreting the data. Understanding them are going to save you from saying something's changed. So if you're looking at trend data and poverty has gone up from, say, 7% to 10%, you need to know what the margins of error around those 7 and 9% data points are in order to say, did poverty actually really change? So it's going to let you know how confident you can be about the data. Another thing that's very important to keep in mind, and it's hard actually because in the past, the census was taken in one point in time. And so the data that we received from the census was what was called a point estimate. Now this is different with the American Community Survey. So the 1-year estimates is a collection of monthly samples taken over a 12-month period. So when we get when we say a poverty rate of 8% in the 1-year estimate, it means that poverty in that particular place averaged 8% over that 12-month period. So we're not saying April 1st anymore. For a 3-year estimate, it's an average over 36 months. For a 5-year estimate, it's an average over 60 months. And this is very different than compared to what we used in the census. Does anyone want to add to that, Jan? Okay. So a question I often get, and probably Jan gets this too, is that, all right, well, if I'm sitting in an area that only receives 3- and 5-year estimates, we don't have enough population to get a 1-year estimate, but I want to look at data for every single year, can I compare the 3-year estimate that was released last year to the 3-year estimate that was released this year? And the answer is you should, but you shouldn't. And the reason is if you look at the graphic, the green bars represent completely independent sets of 3-year estimates, meaning that the first bar on the bottom is for the time period 2005 through 2007. The very next release of 2006 to 2008, if you think about it and you look at those bars, 2 of the 3 years are the same, so they're not independent. So really comparing them to each other is not going to give you an independent a sense of how things have truly changed. You need to wait until a completely independent set of estimates come out. And that would be true for the 5-year estimates as well. Go through just a couple examples on margin of error just so that we understand how we can use them before we move on. In this example, we're looking at the percent of people with bachelor's degree or higher. We're using the 5-year estimate from 2005 to 2009, and we have 4 levels of geography that we're interested in: New York State, Tompkins County, the city of Ithaca, and census tract number 1. So we've gotten smaller and smaller in terms of our jigsaw puzzle piece, if you will. The percent of people with bachelor's degrees is shown, as well as the margins of error for each of those estimates. And the question is, why do you need to use the 5-year estimate in this example? I'm not expecting 50 people to type in their chat box the answer, but if you think about it, we need to use the 5-year estimate because if we want to look at how the census tract number 1 compares to these other levels, the 5-year estimate is the only one that's available for that small level of geography. New York State would have a 1-year estimate because it's of sufficient size, as would Tompkins County. In the next example, we're looking at the percent of families in poverty for New York State, Tompkins County, and Ithaca. And the blue bars are showing that we have different data sets that we're looking at. We have the 2009 1-year estimate. We have a 3-year estimate from 2007 to 2009. And we have a 5-year estimate from 2005 to 2009. Now, which estimate, if you want to compare the percent of families in poverty among those 3 geographic areas, which estimate should you use? The answer would be, well, first of all, you would not be able to use the 1-year estimate because it's not available for Ithaca. Now you have either the 3-year estimate or the 5-year estimate. And this is where you have a little bit of flexibility. Technically, you could use either. If your concern is, I want to keep my margins of error as small as possible so that I feel more confident about the data, you would probably want to use the 5-year estimate because, particularly in the case of Tompkins County and Ithaca, you see the margins of error smaller. But you could use the 3-year estimate if you wanted to. There's no rule against that. Okay, last example for margins of error, we're looking at the percent of foreign-born in Tompkins County. So we're not varying the geography in this case, we are varying data set. We have a number from the census 2000. We have a number from the 3-year 2006 to 2008 ACS. I have an estimate from the 3-year 2007 to 2009 ACS. And the question in this case is, what can we say about the trend in foreign-born persons in Tompkins County? Now, if you've looked at the margins of error around, say, take the middle column here, it's 13% in the 2006 to 2008 ACS. 13% of the population in Tompkins County was foreign-born, plus or minus 1, the margin of error 1. So that would fit the parameters of being able to say that it has increased from 2000, because a margin of error of 1 would mean that you would feel very confident that percent of foreign-born in Tompkins County was between 12 and 14%, which would be a difference from the 10.5% in 2000. And the same with this estimate. So you can say in both cases that there has been an increase from 2,000% of foreign-born people. If the margin of error was large enough that there was no difference between 10.5% and the margin of error interval, then you would not be able to say with statistical significance that there had been an increase. I think we will stop here and see if there's any questions about margins of error before we move on.
Just prompt people to make sure they're clicking on everyone, so that's the top of the drop-down list in the Send To box. And then you can enter your questions here for Robin. Anything that might have stumped you or a question that's lingering on your mind, please feel free to add that into the chat box. I did have a few guesses. I know you've got a private one also, and
so good job guessing on the example. So, Jan, is there anything else you want to add to margins of error? Okay. All right. So have I convinced everyone that they need to pay attention to margins of error? We're not going to talk about it anymore. Well, no, I don't promise. Actually, I lied. We will a little bit, but not ad nauseum and not in the technical terms.
I've got a question that came in that you can't see. Is how do they derive 3-year estimates? Can you go over that?
Well, they make a monthly sample, and they pool those samples for a 3-year period. They have to do so for the smaller units of geography in order to get enough cases over the 3-year period to have any sort of statistical significance. So for these smaller geographic areas, since they're basing their estimates on a sample, if the number was so small, very small, it would not have enough statistical significance that you could say with any level of certainty that that was an accurate number. So a 3-year estimate is necessary in cases where it's not a high population base, and then a 5-year estimate is necessary in these even smaller units of geography. For states in large places, you will have 1-year and 3-year and 5-year estimates available. It's not that they would only do 1-year estimates, but for the small levels of geography, you would only have those 5-year estimates because they have to get enough samples on a monthly basis over a 5-year period in order to build up that base of cases. Does that make sense? Okay, here's another question. This is a really good question. When writing grants and using demographics, are we supposed to include the margin of error in our application or cite our demographic resources? Well, you should. Does everybody do that? No. This is a wonderful case of how people use and misuse demographic data, just like any other type of information. Even if we don't think we do, we all have agendas. We often seek and search for numbers that support our point of view or our goals. However, very responsible users of data should be including the margins of error so that other viewers and users of your data can make informed decisions as to the accuracy of the data. Not everybody's going to do this, though. Not everybody is going to include the margins of error. But now, you having listened to this webinar, know enough to ask if you're a reviewer of a grant application, or if you're looking at a study that's based on American Community Survey data, or any survey data for that matter, if any sort of measure of statistical significance is not shown, you should be asking those questions. And you should cite your demographic sources. Yes, absolutely. Any other questions? Okay. Let's move on. Okay. Now, I'm sure you're all saying, I love the new PAD county level profiles, and I've included the link again. They really are super. I think they're going to get 99% of us 99% down the road, if not 100% down the road. They may include all the data that you need for your county, and you never have to go to the census site or any other data source ever again. However, we did receive a few questions after last month's webinar, which were in the vein of, what if I want to compare counties against each other or create a region? I'm working in an area that 2 or 3 of our counties, we work together, and it would really be great if we could look at the data in the aggregate for our 3 counties. Or what if I wanted to look at this data for my town or my city? How would I do that? So what I want to do today is introduce you to a separate profile toolkit. Now, in future years, I'm going to get myself in trouble here. In future years, Jan and Joe may do new profiles that address some of those questions. We'll have to see. It's a huge endeavor that they undertook, and I think most of us that aren't engaged in the mechanics of putting those profiles together don't understand just how much work is involved. But for the time being, as I said, they will get you very far. But if you have additional questions, you may find this toolkit, this free software package, of use. I'm not going to go to, well, I guess I will go to the website real quick. This is a group called Headwaters. It's out in the West that originally was interested in land use issues, and they received funding from the Bureau of Land Management and the U.S. Forest Service to look at county-level data in the western states, mostly demographic data, because they were trying to make land use decisions, and they were interested in how the human dimensions, the population base, was influencing their land use decisions. And they quickly found out that, hey, as long as we're collecting data for 1,000 counties in the West, we may as well collect data for all 3,100 counties in the whole U.S.
Why not?
So, and they had adequate funding. That was a huge piece of this. So they put together this profile system that's free for everyone to use, and they've recently upgraded it to not county-level data, but sub-county level data, so towns, villages, cities, American Indian areas, and congressional districts, demographic and other data. So I'm just going to show you quickly the website, which you have the link for. Okay. All you need to do, and I won't take it there right now, it's a free download as long as you have Excel, Microsoft Excel on your computer, which I believe probably all of you do. If you download this profile software, it runs as an add-in in Excel for you. So I'm going to go back. I promise you, too, the only email you're going to get from these people is that they've confirmed your registration with their system. You're not going to get hounded to buy things. It's great. It's a really, really great system. What I want to do today is I'm going to run Excel from my computer.
We're going to share that application then, right?
Okay. So what I've done for you, your handout, if you can just follow along, I'm going to pull up Excel on my computer. I'm going to run through hopefully at least 2, if not 3 of these examples that have addressed some of the questions that came up last month about comparing, creating a region, comparing counties, etc. If we don't get through it all today, I really encourage you to download the software, and they have also a nice tutorial on the website, and maybe using the notes I've put together in the PowerPoint to do it on your own. It's actually fairly straightforward after you've used it a couple times. So bear with me for just a second. I'm going to pull up Excel and see if we can run through. So.
Oh, it won't work.
Okay. Everyone see my screen?
Everyone can see your screen.
If you're having problems, let Kimberly know through her chat box.
That's right.
Okay.
And if you can't reach your chat box, you can go up to the menu at the top and click chat. That'll bring the chat down onto your screen, but you'll see it on your screen, but not everyone will see it unless you bring it down. So feel free to chat privately too.
Okay. What I want to do here is if you just can watch, it's very simple, and then when you have time, go try it on your own. So this Excel should look very familiar to everyone. If you notice the top menu, there's this add-in button. Once you have downloaded the free software, the very next time you open your Excel program, when you click on this add-in button, you will see over on the left here, EP/HDT. It stands for Economic Profile Toolkit, etc., etc. So it's sitting right there. It has not downloaded all data for all the towns, villages, and cities and counties in the United States onto your computer. Don't worry. What it has downloaded is the interface for you to access that. You're going to click on that. You're going to select geographies. The very first time that you run this, it will take maybe 5 to 10 minutes to come up to this box. So don't do it the first time if you're in a big hurry. But now that I've been using it over the last several months, it goes very quickly. The very first time is the only time it runs slowly. Look at this box. It shows you there's 14 different types of reports that you can use at the county level. So the first example that I'd like to do is create a region. This was a question that came up, and we'll click on the general report for socioeconomic measures. So you select the report you want, then you come down and you select the state you want. I'm just going to pull together 2 or 3 counties. So in New York State, state or counties. Now we see all the counties in New York State in this drop-down box here. Another nice feature of this too is that you could look at New York Metro or non-Metro if you wanted. I'm going to create a region with, and it doesn't really even matter. You can create a region with a county in New York, with a county in Arizona, with a county in Idaho. You can create whatever region you want, and it doesn't have to make sense to anybody except you, which is kind of neat. I will create Seneca. I'm going to create a 3-county region. I'm going to call it Sub-Finger Lakes. In the middle of a region, you get to call your region whatever you want. So if you're working with a group and you have a particular name for your region, that's great. You can do that. So you've got the counties that you've selected. You've labeled your region, and then you just click Run. Now with this first general report, you must select one or more geographies to use as a comparison. Again, I'd use the state of Alabama as it's suggested, but I don't think that would mean much. I will select New York. Oops. Put it in the other box and click OK. And we'll just take a minute or two to generate the report.
Infinite. We did test this.
We did test this. Don't say that, Kim, because then it won't work. Can they see this?
Yep.
It's grinding through?
They can see everything on my screen.
Yep, so we're getting there. Just bear with us. It's worth the wait. Okay, we do. So what we have here is a report, a very nice report with a cover page that says a profile of socioeconomic measures for the Sub-Finger Lake region. And I could have called that anything I wanted. If you go down to the bottom, you click through the pages, a little bit about the group, and then you have a table of contents. We're going to go through every page. Again, you really need to do this on your own when you have time to explore, but just to give you a flavor of what's possible in this system. The first page of the report, what's nice about this similar to the PAD profiles is that you can click on the charts, tables, and you can copy and paste them into your own documents, citing the source, of course, just like that question. You would cite the source. So there's about 20 pages in this report that go through everything: population, employment, income, etc. Components of population growth, employment changes, from 1970 through the latest ACS numbers. Now, since we're working at the county level, most of the ACS data that's in here is going to be fairly reliable. When we go into future reports, I'll show you how this system deals with margins of error. Another nice feature on this system is similar to the PAD profiles, which they provided a glossary of terms in the back of the profile. This system, you have the data on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side of every page is what they call the study guide. It answers the question, what do we measure on this page? So it gives you a little bit of a description of the variables that they're looking at. And then in red, why is it important? So if you're a user of data and you say, well, I think I need to include income in my report or in my profile, but I need a little bit more justification for why that would be important, this is where you would turn to. If you're looking for more additional resources on these issues, they provided it here, and then their specific data sources for where this specific data is coming from is listed. So very comprehensive. You can just click through. So that is how you would create a report for a region. Okay. I'm going to go back to Excel. So how do I just want to close? I don't want to close Excel, Kimberly. I want to close. Let's see.
Do you want to
close this?
Get out of this?
I just
program?
want to close this profile, but I don't want to close.
Go up to your menu. It's your toolbar.
I don't want to stop sharing.
Oh.
I want to keep sharing the Excel. Bear with me, folks. 1 second.
I think that should work.
However you would normally do it in this application. Should do that.
Okay. All right.
You got it.
Okay. But I see a spreadsheet. That's making me nervous.
No, that's fine.
It's okay? Okay. Excuse me. John assures me all is well, even though I don't see my grid. Okay. Our next example, a couple of you asked, how do we compare 2 or more counties? Now, obviously when you saw this report, it's not the same template as the PAD profile, so we won't be comparing 2 counties in exactly the same way that PAD has presented the data, but I think what's nice about this system is in tandem with the PAD profiles, you've got a nice complement here. So let's try a example of comparing 2 counties. So again, you go back to the top left. You can either close the report. Once you've generated a report, you can email it, you can save it, you can print it, you can do whatever you want with it. I just close mine down, and I'm starting a new one. So I select geographies again, back to the beginning. And in this case, we're going to look at some of the detailed reports, and I'll click on Summary. And now we'll compare. Let's compare those counties that we used into our region, that sub-Finger Lake. So they're all in New York. There, Seneca, and I had Tompkins County. So this is going to generate the data individually for these counties, but compare them in the same report. Now, one of the, I don't know if this is interesting or clunky part of this software, is that regardless whether you want to or not, it will create an additional graphic level in this report on a regional level. So it's going to not only present the data for these 3 or more units individually, but it's also going to aggregate them, which, if it makes sense for you, is great. But if you're just comparing counties across the state that don't really have any connection to each other. It's still going to create a region out of them. You can just ignore that in the report, and I'll tell you where that is. But for our purposes here, we'll label that region again. You hit run. Another minute. Okay. Yep. Okay, again, we get our very nice cover page, summary profile, table of contents. Okay, go right to the first data page. So see, we have Schuyler County individual here compared to Seneca County, compared to Tompkins, and then this region that was created, these 3 units. In this particular case, it might make sense, like I said, depending on what you're running on your profile, it may not make sense, and this unit may be meaningless, so you would just ignore it. And what's nice here is that they also compare it against the, so if you remember early on my presentation, I said, really try to compare yourself to other places and ask the question, what at the state level or the U.S. level as a whole gives you another point of comparison. So here's how you would compare counties against each other. So this is just one of 14 reports you can run at the county level. If you go back to the front page of the EPS system, you'll see that you can look not just at demographics, but you can look at land use, you can look at mining and energy, and the service sector, the tourism and travel sector, government employment, non-labor, etc. So there's a great deal of detail that you can look at. This summary report includes a lot of those sectors as well. Here's a case where you see that some of the numbers in these columns are shaded gray or are gray. They're not black fonts. If you go over to the C guide, talk a bit about confidence intervals and how much accuracy these numbers have. So there's sort of a color coding scheme that's very nice in this report that draws your attention to exactly the margins of error. If you were to look at congressional districts, for example, again, that piece of the jigsaw puzzle is getting really small, so the margins of error are going to go up. You're going to see sometimes the numbers in these columns are shaded orange or even red, and in those cases, you should use extreme caution when using those numbers, if you have to use them at all. So that's just an example then of comparing against each other and creating a region at the same time. My last example that I want to look at is looking at sub-county level. So a number of you also said, well, gee, I'd like to look at my town or my city. And here's the entry box here. All these different reports are available at the county level or greater. If you're looking at sub-county demographies, you will be limited to only just the demographic report here. So let's take a look at New York State. And here's kind of a funny little thing in the system. You'll note if you want a city or town or census designated place, for some reason, do not select city, town, and census designated place. Select subdivisions. If you want a village, you select the cities, towns, and census designated place. I think they've got their labels swapped, but just so that you know that it is there, they are there, they're just in the wrong place. But, okay. So.
Bug in the system.
It's a bug in the system, but
no? Different terms in different states, so they had to choose something.
Oh.
Okay. All right. All right, so if you are looking at villages, alphabetical, all through the state. If you are looking at cities or towns, you'll note that they're alphabetical, but within the counties. So all the counties all listed first. So if we're going, let's use a city within counties that we use before. So if we want Tompkins County, I'm looking at sort of the right side of that box until Tompkins comes up. Ithaca City, Tompkins County, we'll pop that in there. Okay. Seneca Falls. And let's take Watkins, which I believe is only a case where we jump over to the first section. So, and this would be alphabetical. So this is one of the bugs that I only found out when I was playing around with this. So you'll probably be in the same boat, that the first time when you start looking at sub-county levels of geography, you might get a little confused thinking, is it really here? I don't know. I can't find it. It is there. It takes some searching. And again, there's going to be a region. I don't think there's I can think of a region of these three, but the system will lump them together regardless.
And should people go to, do they contact you with questions?
They can certainly contact me if they have questions. They can also, there's a very nice man on the phone at Headwaters that I've called a couple times and really likes to hear from you. So it's a great operation.
A lonely demographer.
The lonely demographer, I know. Again, we have a profile of demographics for these three places, and then we can see that we can compare these municipalities against each other. Here's a case of the orange and the red numbers. So this would be a case of the margins of error in these cases would be high enough that you want to use extreme caution when using these numbers. So that's why we really needed to pay attention to sort of the technical aspects of the American Community Survey, even though I know that most of you didn't want to listen. You're going to go to this system and you're going to see these codes and you're going to wonder why they're there. Also, in the pad profiles, Joe did provide margins of error in the columns next to the data, so you can interpret them directly using margins of error.
I do have a question.
Okay. There's a question?
And the question kind of goes back to, does PAD provide any BLS data for our use?
BS?
B as in Victor,
oh,
ALS, all caps. I'm not sure what that is.
Let's see.
VALS, capital V, ALS.
I'm not sure what.
We'll need further clarification from
Don, if you want to
type. What VALS data is, Don?
Maybe not then. I guess that's the answer.
Okay.
Feel free to chat that into the box if we know what. There you go. Values, attitudes, lifestyle.
We're familiar with that data. I look it up and see what's there and make a decision if we want to include that if it's public data.
So that's currently not included in there, but we can take a look and get some more information on that.
Okay, so I've sort of zoomed you through the Headwaters site. There's another question. I'll get it in just a second, but I hope I haven't confused you. What I really want you to know is just that it's there, that is actually quite easy to use, even though I've given you some caveats around that. Aside from those small wrinkles, it's very simple to use. It is free. It sits on your Excel program. It's just a very nice complement to the PAD profiles. It gives you a little flexibility in creating regions, comparing counties, looking at sub-county level data. So there's some nice features of that as well. So in your presentation, again, I've given you some step-by-step instructions on how to do those three examples. So I do encourage you to go back and look at those. So there was another question here.
It's from Janet, and it is, does the study guide save and print with the report?
That's a good question, Janet, because in some cases you'd want to save and print the study guide. in other cases, if you're presenting this to, say, a client and you didn't really want the study guide, you thought, well, it's a little too clunky. When you go to the print options at Excel with this system, you have the option of printing pages with study guide, pages without study guide. So you have the choice.
Great.
Yeah. So I've already sort of summarized the features of the Headwater system and the pad profiles. So I think, again, as I said, both systems and both set profiles will get you hopefully 99.9% down the road. You can let us know if you have any questions or other comments about that. I've again reminded you that the link for the profiles is here. All 62 counties are up and live. We have another webinar next month, March 15th. My colleague Heidi is going to talk about grant writing, but also how to use demographic data, socio-demographic data as part of that process. I don't know if Kim wants to add to that, but we really did think of these 3 webinars as a series that build upon each other. So hopefully we've given you some good information and some useful tools to do our work even better. So anything you want to add, Kim or Jan?
I was just going to add about registration. So
okay.
Majority of people registered for 3 series, and you're all set. You're all registered. We'll send that information out once we get the connection details. And we'll post the information as we have for this webinar. We've got the recorded from part 1 and hopefully from part 2. It looks like it's working well. So people can catch up if they haven't been able to sit through this. But truly appreciate, Robin, all your work, and Jan, all the work behind the scenes for this webinar. I just think it's really impressive, and people can reach out to you, Robin, if
Sure.
they have questions after the webinar.
Yep.
Just contact Robin at rmb18@cornell.edu. So thanks so much, Robin. Thank you, Jan. Appreciate this.
Thanks, everyone.